right away turn it over to you.
All right, thank you everyone for meeting again today. I'm just going to kind of go through a PowerPoint and kind of review what we did the last time, what we said we were going to do, and then talk about those next steps and what that means. So again, this is your meeting, so at any time just ask me questions or stop. From the last meeting, we agreed to keep the benchmark group, look at how you're going to weight or compare to that group. Recalibrating the grid that you currently have, the board would set the pay philosophy. The intent would be to move HHS to one grid, address grades 87 through 91, and then implement date July 1st for 87 through 91, the old system in HHS. That's what we talked about last time. How we recalibrated the board based on our discussions was to first take off those first two steps, add two steps to the grades, increase the number of grades. So again, we're going from 15 grade total to 23. So that allows us to address our market competitiveness. You can still set your pay philosophy of where that is, but those adding of grades really helps address some. Yep.
Yeah. When we say take off 2 steps and add 2 steps, is it necessary to add 2 more steps, or can we just go with a 10-step system? I thought we kind of talked about that.
You could, it just will set you up differently where your min and your max is to the market, and you're not using, for the most part, for hiring on those steps 1 and 2, so you're not currently using them just to be more competitive. You're kind of hiring after that step 2 range. But you don't have to, you can leave it, but then that just recalculates where you are to the market. Because we're trying to look at
makes the steps bigger too.
We're trying to look at the market of where your mins are and then where their maxes are. Then we try to say, okay, well, how long does it take them to get there? So what's that range between the min and the max? Because you could have 12 steps. Then if you keep your max where it is, it changes the steps. And if you had 5 steps, it would make it really big steps to get to the top. So
I think you're saying that whether you have 10 steps or 12 steps, if you set the minimum as the minimum and the max, it doesn't change the rate that people are paid at the max.
If you set it at the max, you would go backwards and you could cut it off at any point. It just changes where it is, or
right.
You recalibrate.
So you reach the max in 10 steps rather than 12 steps. But if we set that we wanted to be at whatever percentile or whatever rank of the max, the number of steps, the number of steps says how long it takes to get to that number.
Right, but what we did is because the percent between the steps, it was a good way to recalibrate that grid. So we basically added 2 on. So if I were going to be maxed out at the current max, I would have 2 more to go. So what it did is it helped the people at the maximum kind of continue, so it rewards for the tenure.
Although it depends on what we said is the maximum pay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So that can fluctuate, but again, you can go there as many steps, as few, or as many as you want.
Isn't there an advantage to be at 10? They can get up there quicker? I mean, is that?
So most entities will have anywhere between 8 to 10 steps. So the more steps you have, the smaller your percent is, because if you keep your wage range the same, if you keep it to be bigger and you have 5, then it just makes your wage range a lot larger.
Okay, because my understanding was we had the problems at the lower end. We really didn't have problems at the top end currently.
Yep, you have about, I think it's coming up in one of my slides, you have a large number of employees that are currently maxed out, so they're only getting COLAs. So that's the kind of the part where I'm just going to say poaching starts to happen, because you have no more growth here. You can move somewhere else for that additional growth. The minimum, you're right, is where, and that's why we said if we cut off 1 and 2 and made it, that's how we would address that. To say if you started out at 1 and it was $20, now the new one would be $22.50 if that's how it worked out. So we would be able to recruit more because we're fixing that end.
Right. And then you say like that poaching will start, but so this is only going to buy us 2 more years, and then we got to redo it again.
No, because we're recalibrating the whole grid. That's just one of the things. And then what we did is we also added steps between. Grades between. So again, in the old one you had 15. So remember we had a lot of compression between staff and supervisors, we're now trying to eliminate that. You're never going to fix it so everyone continues to grow 10 steps. The whole point of it is, though, to get you guys to where the board is comfortable with where their market competitiveness is, and then adjust that grid every year to whatever you determine your market adjustment or COLA is, because then you'll stay more competitive. But you're right, this is never done. So you'll always have to do it. It's just like your roads. As soon as you put that nice coat on, it starts to deteriorate and you have to do things to maintenance. That's why we're trying to do things more frequently so you don't have a big wage gap. But yeah, if you wanted, you could add, keep adding the steps, but then you know what I mean? It just kind of depends on how you want to recalibrate it.
I think the process that we're going down, what we've kind of decided to go down, is to continually look at the pay grid and continually upgrade it. If you were going to just implement it and say for 12 years we're not going to touch it,
No.
yes, people will fall off the end.
For sure.
But as long as you continually update, hopefully you will move with the market. And
Yeah,
your
eventually you
max
can
will
max
still
out.
be
That's
outside
okay,
of
as
where
long
you
as
are.
you're maxing out with the market. What you don't want to have happen is you max out and then the market keeps moving
Right.
and you're like, wait a second, I'm still back here. So that's why.
Which is kind of where we were.
Yep, everything we're doing is to try to do that. I mean, you had a lot of issues with your old pay grid. One is you just had really small because there was fewer grades. So that just caused some inequities to some positions because where they were really off to the market. And so creating more, we can fix some of those and not have to adjust everything. And we want to reduce the compression between the supervisor and the line staff. We want to incentivize you to manage people, not say, hey, will you manage people and still make the same money?
So I hear about compression. Is there a gap problem also? I mean, when a supervisor makes too much, a lot more, or versus the staff, because
Well, I think that's,
I've heard that staff says, well, I do most of that job anyway, and he's getting or she's getting this kind of wage, and I'm getting this kind of wage. I mean, there's gap issues also?
I mean, that's why we reclassify jobs. I wouldn't say that. So, I mean, I guess if the argument is I do most of the supervisor's job, well, then why are you doing that? And then your job description isn't right. And or you have a performance issue where the supervisor is not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that would be a performance management issue. If Scott decided I'm only going to do half of my job, everyone else can do the rest, that would be a performance issue. His grade, his level of classification is still going to be the same, but then you'd have to say, Scott, if you don't do your job, there's a ramification. If, though, the organization has changed so much that their line staff are taking on, that's why we want to look at those reclassifications. But typically, if you have a person here, you still are going to have some levels between them, because even at the end of the day, if we were making widgets, I still have to supervise your behavior. I have to manage the budget. I have to buy the inventory for those widgets. You're making them. Do you know what I mean? So there's always going to be a difference. But if something else, then we have to discuss that, because that could be a performance issue.
That's why during performance review, you always need to go back to job description and tie job description
Right.
with performance review.
And that's why we're reviewing the job descriptions too, because some things have drastically changed in the last couple of years. But if it's to what you're saying, then it's the supervisor's not. Is it because it's a bad supervisor, or is that just because that we haven't updated those job descriptions? Does that answer your question?
Yep, thank you.
I have one question
Yep.
too, and this might be just because when it came on board here, but I have a question about the implementation date of July 1st.
Sure.
And the reason is I believe that everybody's using the same 2023 pay grid except for HHS and one union that hasn't yet settled. Is that correct?
Yes.
Everybody's on the same 2023 grid. So I don't understand why we wouldn't move everybody to the new pay grid at the same time, rather than moving some groups July 1st and some groups January 1st.
So the last time when we implemented, I wouldn't say round one, because we've been doing this a while, grades 86 and lower got changed. 87 through 91 we didn't touch.
So you mean the grid
That was actually round two.
So you
Okay.
mean the grid for the lower numbers changed
Yep,
and that upper one didn't. So even though they're on the same grid, they didn't get an adjustment at that time.
right. We basically, I mean, if this was your grid, we just said we're gonna change this part and leave this kind of the same. So they got a COLA, but their min and maxes stayed the same.
They
I
were
understand.
adjusted at the end in the fall of last year. There was some adjustment
Yep,
to finalize.
I see.
for the 23 scale. So
Okay.
if you go backwards, so the first implementation was only the LELS groups for the end of 21. Then at the end of 22, it was the AFSMI and then the non-union below 86 and below. And then for this year, the general scale, which without the pay study, is where the 87-91 is on. HHS had the general adjustment to their scale, and then Teamsters are still unsettled for this year.
But there was some adjustment 87 to 91.
To the scale, yes. Yep.
And I wasn't there, but I think the reason there wasn't an adjustment on those 87 to 91 is because the majority of the board felt that those levels didn't need to be adjusted. Now, I may be wrong about that,
Right.
but that was my understanding.
Right, and I think right at the end of the year, when that last proposal where I was coming from, it was a slight increase. I felt that 87 through 91 were at the top of the scale,
Right,
and
but
I was
then the
comfortable with that.
Adjustment wasn't
It
necessary.
wasn't necessary, but we did do some adjustment to get, and I think there was, like you said, between 86 and 87, from my recollection. So 87 through 91 did get adjusted.
Yeah, so the 86 and below got the pay study, 87 to 91, there was adjustments to the scale, but not the pay study.
Correct.
So they aren't on the same
But
pay
They're on the
scale.
same grid. But we didn't apply the pay study to
Think of it as
87 to 91.
Legos. The grid is built on grades, so you just have different color Legos for each one. The top Legos did a full pay study and the 2023 adjustment. The bottom Legos just had the 2023 adjustment.
And
But you know what I mean? They're still in the same grid. It's just that they didn't get the same changes or the whole implementation, if you would say.
right, and if I'm hearing Todd, I'm hearing him say that it was because there was a belief that that part didn't need adjusting. That's what I'm hearing. And I'm not sure if that's what the board decided, but that's how I'm hearing it. So if I'm incorrect, please tell me.
Correct as far as that is.
I'm correct. I'm understanding that
From
correctly.
my point.
And then I believe that HHS got adjustments within the system that they were already in.
State merit system.
Right, they didn't get adjustments through the pay study, but they weren't part of that system at that time.
Correct.
Is that correct?
And they
They-
also got the COLA.
General wage adjustment.
They
Yes.
got the general adjustment. I don't think they got anything else.
Whatever,
There wasn't anything else changed, was there, Mike?
well, whatever the merit system does,
Yeah,
they got.
which is nothing.
Yeah.
So they got the general adjustment.
And the step, if they were eligible for
Yes.
one on the HHS system.
You can't change because they're paid under the merits. And if merit didn't provide, we couldn't.
That was the system they were on at
That's
that
the
time.
system they're on, that's what they're providing.
Yes, that's all I wanted to make sure I understood correctly. Okay.
Okay. We're good?
Back to you.
Perfect, we'll keep moving. So this was one of the proposed grids we had talked about last time. And this moves, it does create there's more grades you can see. It took off kind of those first two, added two, that was kind of recalibrated. So I think where we were last time and what we talked about is kind of setting that philosophy. Where does this put us to the market? So one way of looking at it is you were at, let's go to this slide. Yeah, this helps. So you were at 11% above market average. This moves you to 20% above market average. So a 9% like overall adjustment.
So I have a question about that. Do you mean that the overall salary of every employee would go
No.
up by 9%?
No,
No, okay.
no, because again, it's where people are falling in. We have new grades that weren't even there before. Some people will get very little adjustment if they're paid exactly where they should. But some, if they're under like the men, they're going to get a bigger adjustment. If we truly just left the grades where they were, we didn't add any, then you would have additionally 2 extra steps. But even then, not everyone would get those because you don't get them until you move there.
So it's 9% of what then?
Of where you are to kind of the market. So again, the way you should look
So
at.
you're taking the average.
Yep.
We aren't talking about a rank right now. We're just
Nope,
talking
I'll
about
get
the,
into- yep.
yeah, I understand that. And so right now, we're 11% above the average of those 11 counties.
Yep.
And this pay grid would put us to 20% above the average of those 11 counties.
And that, yep,
Is
on
that correct?
average, yep. So your pay grid again is set by your philosophy.
Right.
Updated job descriptions, and then internal equity. On average, that's where you sit to the market. Not every single job is exactly there because you have to calibrate it based on all of the other circumstances. Another way of kind of looking at it is where you, if you're at market with the number of benchmarks you have, 5 counties pay higher than you. So of your benchmarks, 5 are going to pay higher. Where you are at 11% above, you basically have 3 to 4 counties that are paying higher than you. If you moved to the 20% above, you have 1 to 2 counties that are on general paying above you. Now with that, not all counties have the same jobs for every single position, so it's not every single position, but that's how it looks. Yep.
When you were talking about the 5 counties or the 3 to 4 counties, is that within our benchmark?
Yep, your
group,
benchmark
or
group.
not
Yep, we
everybody?
didn't change, nope, we didn't change that at
That's
all.
basically the 11 county southeast region.
Yep,
Okay, thanks.
so it's just saying of that, that's where market would be where you're at, you're slightly above, and that was kind of a philosophy of, hey, we like our benchmarks, we're not moving them, but we believe we are more closer to this part of the benchmark group, if you will.
Thank you.
I understand.
Okay. So we did talk about the 90th percentile last time. And what that basically does is it just takes your data set. So if these are my 10 counties for my job, it says, here's all of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and it says the 90th percentile is right here. It just puts a calculation in there. It doesn't say that I'm going to be 10% of that market because
No.
percent, okay.
I understand that, but the second county, their rank in order, because there's 11 counties, would be 90.9, because you can't really do a 90 because we were 11 counties.
But again, percentile doesn't equal.
I'm not talking percentile, I'm just
Okay.
ranking them.
Yeah, if you ranked them.
If-
Yep. One way to look at it.
There isn't a 90th county out of 11 counties. There's the second county would be 90.9, the third county would be 81.82, and that's just a rank, okay? If you're
Yes.
third in line, you'd be 81.82. If you're second in line, you'd be 90.9. And so even with that 90 percentile, if we chose that, we'd have to decide, well, what does that really mean? Does it mean we can be $1 under the second county, or what does that mean?
Right.
Yeah,
Because, yeah, you're right. Percentile and ranking are different.
I
Another
understand
way
that.
you could say is we're going to be the third of our benchmark.
Mhm.
That would be a way to look at it too.
which might be easier to understand because then you can see it.
Yep.
Yeah.
You just have to know that those 2 counties are going to fluctuate. They're not always going to be the same.
No, I
two.
understand
You know what I
that.
mean? Because of the market and their positions.
And I think we all understand that this is just a vicious cycle. If we say we want to be in the top 20% and you do this for 5 other counties and they say we want to be in the top 20%, well, up and up and up and up.
Yeah.
Because they're going to leapfrog us because they want to be in 20 and we're into it. So it's just standard with government. We're all. None of I don't know that you're going to present this offer to anybody and they say, well, we want to be 20% on the lower.
Well,
That they're going to
but-
maintain and say we're going to
but
be.
I guess
Everybody says
my
this
view-
just naturally.
my
That's why I
view
said it's a vicious cycle. We just keep bumping up and up and up, which is
is I want
is what
to
it
pay
is.
people as well as we can,
Yeah.
while respecting the taxpayers and what they're paying.
right.
And so that we have to pay within what our tax
With the
base
market.
allows us
That's
to pay.
But that doesn't
No, but that's what we
take
have to
into
decide.
effect,
We
right,
have to decide.
where we're a market.
Yeah. The market and our tax base are different things.
Right, in every county, even if I did all 87 counties, no two counties are going to have the exact same benchmarks.
No.
No two counties are going to have the same pay philosophy. So it, even though some are moving the other direct, you know what I mean? So there's constantly moving. I mean, right now, like I said last time, you're in a bad position like we went to predict it. In 2 years ago, average or above average probably would be fine, but now there's a labor shortage and you have the private sector that's paying entry-level positions higher than some of your county positions. So now I can move, do you know what I mean? So it keeps moving. Now, will it continue? I don't know. If I did, I definitely won't be doing this job if I knew where the economy was going to be. So all I can do is help the board pay what they would say is competitive and then just maintain that and make adjustments. Because again, that's going to be, to your point, your definition or pay philosophy is going to change. And what you don't want to have happen is wait 10 years and then now you have an implementation cost of 10, 15, 20%.
Our competitors are other counties, but there are also lots of other things too.
Right, for sure. Yep. I mean, part of why people stay is because it's a good place to work too. You know what I mean? So all of those are taken into consideration, hopefully. The benefits of moving to the pay grid that I showed earlier was, it reduces that, it allows HHS to move in, it calibrates that for competitiveness. But again, this has to be a pay philosophy that's set by the board. If you implemented for grades 87 to 91, so maybe we're jumping ahead, is Commissioner, July 1st. I mean, we talked about that last time. Is there not an agreement to do that?
I don't know that we felt like we made an agreement.
I think we want a dollar amounts of what it was
that's
going to
okay.
cost, with the understanding that it just,
We can't agree to something we don't know what it costs.
Okay.
the dollar. amount
And
isn't gonna
she's
change
got
that
that for you
much
today.
By the end of the year, either way, we just.
Well, right.
Perfect, okay. So, so moving people in, now implementation can go a million different ways. So this is one estimate, and I'm going to explain kind of what that means. But if you did July 1st implementation for this group of 87 to 91, it would be about $48,481. This would put them into the system with at least a 3% increase. That is how you implemented for the union employees and those other grades. So it moves them in. Unless you were at 12, then you kind of stay there. With that, so that's like one cost, okay? You could say, we're gonna then give people steps, how that works, all of that after that date determines, because half of the employees will still have an anniversary step after that July 1st. Now, it would be budgeted in if they still had steps anyways. So it's where do you kind of cut that off? If you continue that, give them their step they would have gotten and implement, or kind of continue moving ahead.
So I guess I have a comment and a question. I think I understood from Andrea and you, Scott, that we didn't put money in the budget for implementing this on July 1st. Is that correct, or is that not correct?
We didn't put it in this annual budget because we put it in the 2022 budget.
All right, so I
So
understand
there's probably a little over $1 million
Yeah.
that's been held for the remainder of the implementation for the last three groups.
that. Okay.
So there's money.
I understand that. And then, to me, I think the biggest decision the board needs to make is, where do we really think we fit in this rank of 11 counties, both with what we can afford, but where we think we need to be, okay? And I might feel differently than the other four of you, but where I'm coming from is, we're fourth in population, we're fourth in median income, we're fourth in growth, we're fourth in poverty, and we already rank above fourth for both what our median property tax is now, and we already rank above fourth for the percentage of our income we need to pay for the median property tax. So my concern about going to the 90th percentile is that we're going to increase that gap, where we're going to have even a larger spread of what our property tax rates are relative to these 11 counties, and what our median income that we're going to have to pay relative to these 11 counties. So what I wonder is when we're fourth in income, fourth in population, fourth in poverty, and fourth in growth, why we would think we should be somewhere other than fourth. And there might be a very good reason why we should think that. But kind of my view is that I don't think that we can expect the taxpayers to pay a higher percentage of their income than surrounding counties. That's kind of where I'm coming from.
But you're only looking at one number.
I'm not, I just gave you a whole bunch of numbers.
Yeah, but you're looking at one number, the property tax.
And people's income
But-
and the population.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that. But when you're comparing to other counties, Rice County has an $80 million budget, just about the same as ours.
Mhm.
But what's their property tax?
Well, I can tell you what their property tax is. Their median property tax
No,
is.
their property tax, what they levy, what their levy is.
Their levy is a lot lower than ours.
Why?
Well, when I looked at that, I did that through the audit, and I looked at all those
Right.
11 counties and looked at their percentage. Goodhue County paid the largest percent of their budget through the levy compared to any of the other 11 counties. So all the other 11 counties were under 50% of their budget was levy dollars. Goodhue County, over 50% of their budget was levy dollars. So I did look at that number too.
Okay, so so that means they're getting revenue from some other source.
I agree with that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so where's that other source?
Well, it looked like it was the federal government, the state government, and some of the fees they were charging. That's what it looked like.
Which fees are a tax?
Sure.
In a way to look at it. So I think until you compare all the numbers,
Yeah.
I mean, just for example, Mower County gets a lot of dollars from energy production tax
From the windmills.
from the windmills.
Mhm.
We don't.
Mhm.
We get ours from a nuclear plant, which produces a hell of a lot more energy than probably any other county in the state. We don't get any production tax.
Mhm.
So really, if we said Prairie Island is really our production tax, so you took that out of the levy, 20% out of the levy, we are now down to
Well,
being at 70%, $700.
I'm looking at
We're in the middle of a-
property tax also, which was higher than any other county, and the percent of the median income to pay that property tax, which was also higher than any other county. And I don't think our county taxpayers want to be top on the list of those two things. I just don't
Well,
believe they do.
but you're not, what I'm trying to point out is you're not comparing apples to apples.
There are no apples to apples.
Right.
Yeah.
So production tax paid in Mower County, $3 or $4 million a year, versus us collecting property tax, which is a different line in the auditor's report from the nuclear plant. If you take the nuclear plant and said, that really shouldn't be on the property tax line, it should be like down here with production tax, and you take that 20% out of what we levy, which they pay, we're right in line with everybody else.
Well, I don't think
We're at
that's-
$700 per capita.
Well, perhaps with the levy, but with the property tax and the income, because you said not to take one number. So our median property tax was $2,002. We were first on the list of 11 counties for the median property tax. And then when you look at the percent of income to pay that median property tax, we were first on that list too. Okay?
So the $2,002 number is county tax?
Yeah, it's county tax.
Only county tax?
That's what I understood.
Because I own a property that's valued at $260,000, which is like $60,000 higher than yours.
Uh-huh.
My county property tax is $1,055.
Okay, well.
So that's total
This was
tax, that's
reported-
total tax,
No,
not
this
just county
This
tax.
was listed as county tax, is what it was listed at. So I could be wrong, but my point is that whatever we do, I believe, with increasing wages is going to be more levy dollars. And I believe, I don't think we have another way to pay for it.
And I believe that that would increase people's property tax. And our property taxes were already very high. So I'm reluctant to do things that bring our property tax number higher when we're already at the top of this group.
So am I hearing you that you don't want to make any adjustment to pay scale?
No, I think we're fourth in everything. So I think it would make sense that we'd be fourth. I think we can afford to be fourth. I don't think we can afford to be second.
Right. Hang on one second.
Yep.
Is there anything that you're going to get into that might address what we're talking about?
We didn't pay her to do that.
Pardon?
We paid her to do a base study.
Okay.
Well, I have something that can address it, I think, and like.
All right.
That would be helpful.
Is it all right with you if we
Absolutely.
let Dr. Mel?
And I
All right,
said
go
what I
ahead.
have to say now, so.
So, nope, I think that's fine. Like what you're saying, I'm just going to say, or what I would say is indicators. What makes Goodhue County special? And that is part of the discussion of where do you set yourself for the pay philosophy. With that said, everything varies because if you said it's these four, they are going to have low taxes. Well, then this one has no income or lower medium. They don't all just gradually, all of those indicators don't match up
No, they don't.
nicely.
Yeah.
So you have to prioritize what does that mean for the county and what do we think we want to look like? I would say to your argument, if you're okay being in that 4, right now you have 3 to 4 counties that pay higher than you. So you're 11% above average, but you're not able to fill some positions and people are leaving. So if you stayed at that theory, then you're okay people leaving, you're okay having openings. So the fact that if that's how you look at one, it may not be a direct correlation of what you need to pay people in this area to stay here, the work level, the service level, all of the above.
I understand what you're saying, but I don't know that the property taxpayers would agree with you. And maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe they would agree with you fully.
Well, I mean, I would just ask them, do you want to have the services that we continue? Because if you do, you have to have staff in those positions. So if you have positions that are 9-month open or complete turnover, that's costly too to my paying taxes. Do you know what I mean? Because now we're a training ground for somebody else. So that's costly too. So, I mean, I think that what you did is, that's where my mind would go to. What can I compare? The issue is they're not all apples to apples. And if you have 4, they're not all going to match. If you had only one indicator and said the most important thing for Goodhue County is X, then you could say that's at least apples. And then you'd see who's in that. But then you might say, oh, but that doesn't have that department. Do you know what I mean? Then it just kind of.
But I don't think Goodhue County is ever going to be able to pay enough to keep people from traveling to Dakota County if they want to do that, or
Sure.
to Olmsted County if they want to do that. So I don't believe we can compete based on salary. It would have to be other things.
Well, and Dakota's not even in the mix.
I understand,
So,
but it's raised often that we
Right.
lose people to Dakota County.
well, and you could, I mean, someone could say you could lose to Hennepin now because they have so many telecommuting. I don't know that people want to work there. Do you know what I mean?
Right,
Because
right.
they like it here. I would just caution, I think it's good to have people leave because sometimes you want them to, and
Sure,
sometimes
sure.
you want new people coming in and new thoughts or whatever. You just, I would say, want to watch that you're not the training ground. I'm just going to use your detention. You get them all trained, you pay a lot of money for that, and then they leave. Now you have to pay overtime because we can't keep that filled, which is 1.5 of what I would have to pay someone. Do you know what I mean?
I understand that, but I also believe that these other counties are also having problems filling their positions, even the ones that are paying higher. I believe that's true, and maybe I'm wrong about that, because there's so many job openings, and we do have a labor shortage in general. So I don't believe that that's necessarily solved the problem. And I could be wrong about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, every county is going to have some issues, but I would say if you have a position that's open 9 months, that's not a typical thing.
We've had some
Some
over
things
a year.
aren't sustainable that way.
Yeah.
A lot of things aren't sustainable.
Yeah.
I think we had an equipment operator open for a year and a half, so, or was it 2? Was it 2?
Can you identify if, as we've adjusted this too, if we're picking, I'll pick three, like, so you got the equipment operator, detention deputy, and assessor, are probably ones that we've noticed that have trouble hiring and moving. So even by expanding this pay grade to 23, are they still, so they're gonna move up a little bit to entry level, but we were so far off, like assessor, I think it was a $5 an hour difference of the hiring and stuff, possibly.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact
So-
number, but yep.
Are we, and then if we looked at that, are they moving enough where they would actually have to move up steps
And a grade.
and a grade?
That's why we
and
created those.
reassigned, but you're making specific market adjustment to that position to where they would fall in the pay grid we're still using this wonderful point system,
Yeah,
that is going to put them in a reasonable, that specific item, and not saying that, well, they're a pay grade, whatever they are, 84 or whatever now, that everybody else along with the pay grade 84. It's also now got shifted because are you making specific market adjustments to specific jobs, like the assessor, detention deputy, equipment operator, to move them farther up on the pay scale because of where we've noticed lacking in the market pay?
so I'm not just moving them by the market, because you can't do that. Pay equity would say, no, you can't just.
There's just to take a step back.
Right, but
I know, but I wish everybody here, and we could get to a point where the market doesn't care about pay equity. I hate to break it to you, but they don't. I don't care about pay equity, and I wish the rest of us here would not. That we would focus on what it takes to get people in to work and to maintain their job. We're not inequitable here. We've got an equity committee, and they have brought us nothing that shows that we're inequitable for 2 years, which you're supposed to as a side point. But I wish we could just take pay equity and say, just
talk to
get back here.
legislature.
Yeah, I will.
No, I get it.
Talk to them, but over here. Now let's make
Yep,
work, let's make it pay and make sense for employees working, because pay equity isn't in the market, okay?
Yep.
So let's ignore it for a while. Let's get this structured. Now, let's see where we fall in pay equity. Let's not let pay equity drive any of this. Let's put it back, not even consider it. So let's just not bring it up and worry about it. Let's pay people where we need to in the market to get this working for us.
so this is how I would say I answered that question. At first, when I take it, I say, I'm just gonna use the assessor, because you use that, like appraiser, let's just say.
Yep.
And here's where it is to the market. There's a gap, okay? So when I build a pay grid, they still have pay equity points, I'm not gonna say, but they have to move in. So I'm like, okay, this grade, that's where we start to calibrate, is based on the jobs that have apples to apples. And then we want to make sure the ones that are significantly under are where the market is, and then making slight adjustments by plopping other people in there. So to your question, that's how I start the process, because public health nurses was the other one that you have an issue with. So every time I adjust the pay grid by percentile or percentage or ranking or whatever, I manually have to go in and make sure those are at least, to your point, at market or slightly above, so that those, let's just say 6 positions are at a competitiveness. And then that's what then starts everyone else sliding in, because they are paid where they are. But to your point, like, they might move, not only get those 2 steps, but they might get a different grade or 2, because now we're adding those. And that's how we adjust those. I didn't change pay equity, but I'm looking at the market, and because you have more grades, I'm able to.
You have made adjustments to market adjustments on this pay grade to job descriptions that we have known that we have issues with, so.
I'm matching it. I wouldn't say I'm making adjustments specifically, but I'm matching it to make sure that's how I calibrate the grid. Because the grid, to your point, you want to be, those 6 positions were like our first thing. If you can get these fixed, slide the rest in, and then bring in HHS, that was our kind of like our goal, because we didn't fix some of those problems with the last time because we had compression issues. So that's what we tried to do.
Well,
Yes.
as long as we're not sliding in the aspect that we have, because of pay equity, now we have to bump these up, that.
No, you have more, basically, think about it this
You
way.
have more options with the wider pay grade. So I'm just, because it always keeps coming up,
I
how
know.
we're getting, I want to make sure that we're solving, that this has solved.
Yep.
Moved some of those.
So to your
transitions.
point, the market doesn't care what pay equity does, and pay equity doesn't care what the market does. Like, you could pay all your employees $1, as long as you did equitably, it would be fine. But then you have to look at your pay grid. That's where it goes into, we need to now calibrate it based on our job descriptions to make sure We don't have compression and gaps. We're not paying someone 3 times too much. But then where do you want to be competitive? That's why that pay grid we can change. And I know there's been some concerns like what we're bringing and how many, can we do other options? Yeah, we can. We just have to, as a board, kind of say we're comfortable here. Now, when we do implementation costs, like I'm giving you some today, we have to go through that job classification appeal to make sure employees look at their job description, say it's right, this is where they fit. That may change some again. But I think the big thing is for the board is to say, we started out and this was our goal, is to add and to do that. Now we need to talk about where does that put us to the market, because it means different things to everybody. But it also, the group has to kind of figure out how competitive do you want to be and how do you want to do. And I would say the big difference is if you change it, so like go to 120 to 117% above market, so a 6%, overall change. That doesn't mean employees are getting a 6% increase, but it's just recalibrating that pay grid. That will do a lot of what the grid I showed you earlier, but what it does is some employees will be maxed out and a lot of them will be then at that step 12. So to your point, they're kind of maxed out. There isn't future growth. If you think ahead, do you want a long-term fix, one that you can do, budget for, then I would say you try to do a little bit above market, and then the market's going to kind of hopefully settle down. Otherwise, you're going to be at the same point where we have to recalibrate again, because to your point, everyone else is adjusting, we have to readjust too.
When you say future growth, and maybe and maybe other people here can answer this. So is it an expectation of employee, say in Scott's position, that he should be able to, so he's been working here for 12, 15 years? 17 years. So I'm having a hard time understanding that he should expect a step increase every year along with the cost of living. I mean, I don't know what the expectation of growth.
No.
I work for myself, I pay, myself. I'm just not, when you say that they're looking for future growth, if you're taking on more, having a different position, but if your department heads, you're maxed out, when you bring that up of future growth, that's why when we look at the max, like I think what Todd's question initially about the 10 steps was get rid of the bottom 2, but not necessarily increase 2. Our max is our max. I guess it's a discussion the board we need to have is I don't know that
But if
it's an unreasonable expectation that everybody.
If everybody else's max is going up, you're not gonna be competitive.
Well, depends.
Well, they go up with the COLA for sure.
Right.
So the way
Where we're at with
if
max.
we were a perfect world, the way it should work is Scott maxes out. As he moves through the grid, he's competent in his position, and then every year you adjust that grid so he stays in line with the market, because your market adjustment is supposed to be, do you know what I mean? So you always stay on
That's
the
what I'm assuming.
grid.
You just, when you bring up something like
Right,
future.
but what'll
growth, it's just like,
happen
we need
is
to-
if you didn't increase your max, then you're gonna have some people that are now starting to fall behind the grid. So like even a COLA adjustment, they're not even on the grid. In a perfect world, if you,
From a market standpoint.
if you
Not
set
looking
it
at
up
pay
and
grid.
said, here's my min, here's my max, every year we're gonna do a market adjustment, and everybody else did that, and nothing else weird happened with the economy, then you wouldn't have this issue. But because all of those things happen and you have issues, this max, I'm just gonna use Scott because you used him, it might have been, he might be here, and maybe no one else is paying, then fine, that COLA keeps him on the grid. But if everyone else is increasing, then now he's not on the grid. Do you know what I'm saying? He's
Which
not.
is what I identified with that vicious cycle of everybody having a 20 percentile. It's going to continue to go up. So
Yeah,
I
and
think
not
you answered
everyone's
my
a-
questions in that. And I was trying to correlate with what Susan was answering, what the taxpayer can afford, and that's why I wanted to make sure that we knew that we've made adjustments for our the challenging job positions that we are losing
Sure.
people and making that those are into their implementation. So we're good. I got my
Excuse me,
answer.
Lisa?
Yeah, I just had a question too. So you're doing the calibration on the couple of jobs that we were having a hard time filling. But then what happens, I mean, that's this year. So for instance, I have a position that's been open for 40 days already, which I've never had in that position before. So let's say next year, 2 years, it's different positions that we're having. So are you doing another adjustment
Well, that's why we do ongoing maintenance, so that
Yep.
you don't, that we are matching the market. And I'm not saying we're only adjusting those 6, but that's kind of how we're starting to, as a baseline, when we calibrate, we're looking at those in particular and then seeing where the other ones fall in. If we have one that's like 40% above market, that's not classified correctly, then we need to make an adjustment, you know, in the new system. So all of that has to happen. But to your point, it is a vicious cycle, because now we got these 6 fixed. Well, then this one's, do you know what I mean? So that's why if you do, oh,
Constant, sorry.
that was moving too. If you look at it every year and make those, the goal is you don't have a huge taxpayer issue, because you're doing small adjustments more frequently, so you don't have this huge wage gap to where you are to the market. And once you agree to this is where we want to be, that kind of sets that. Then when you market, then you have something to say, yep, this is where we are now. We're okay this year. We're, you know, or these couple positions are falling behind. Is it because they're classified right? I don't know. That could be the first thing I would say is, has it been updated in a while? The job description, has it been reclassified? That's what I would first say, because if it's not matching the market and pretty much everything else is, that's what I would say.
But an assessor in Goodhue County or an assessor in any other county, if they're doing an equity study and their jobs are basically the same, they'd show up relatively the same place in other counties.
Not for
Not
pay.
necessarily.
Well, no, I mean, they're paid, but I mean,
Classification.
the classification, they get a number of points. And the different counties.
Depends on the system.
Everyone uses a different system, and unless you literally had me rating all the jobs
I
in the
see.
county,
So,
you can't say it's
another
apples to apples,
county-
because Commissioner Flanders might come in and say, my interpretation of impact of results is
Uh-huh.
X, Y, and Z, and she applies it different. Do you know what I mean?
So another county might be rating assessors higher.
They might, but they also might be because they are set up different. Their land records, do you know what I
Sure,
mean?
there might
Like,
be a good reason, or it might be just how they did it.
Yep,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the beast of this, is it's not,
There's a lot of wiggle room.
Yeah, there's a lot of wiggle room, there's a lot of interpretation,
Mhm.
but I mean, the benefit of having a consultant is I do work with a lot of counties, so I kind of see some of these nuances, and I can say, well, here's why they pay this, because their department does X, Y, and Z, and you don't, or their budget is 3 times yours, or whatever may be the case, you're looking at it, but to your point, they're not all paid the same, and they might not all be pointed the same, because if you're assessed, I think, I just read the report of how many assessors you need by parcels of land. That's also going to impact, do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like how many you have and what your responsibility is, and then what you bring in for taxes. I mean, all of those are indicators that can change that.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is back to Jason's comments earlier, but we hired Tessa to address as many problems as she could, and that's what she's trying to do with what she has today. And one of the things, and Jason brought up me as an example, I wouldn't worry about myself, but we have people in their 30s and 40s that they're on step 12. And so by going to this model, it does give them some level of another step or two. Because in some cases, we've had to bring people, so because of what our scale is, we've had to bring them into the scale so high that they're coming in and they're staring at, boy, I got 3 steps left for the rest of my life. So that's part of what she's trying to address, is have, some future growth. And again, part of that is because the bottom of our scale hasn't been all that relevant for quite a while. So.
We can
Thank
also
you.
compare with the private sector.
Right.
How many steps you get in the private sector?
Depends on,
I'm just saying. So.
yeah, some
I-
places 0.
Right.
Right.
So I'm just saying, I don't know why the focus is if you're 30 to 40, I don't.
Well,
If you've worked here for 12 years and you're maxed out in your steps,
I think a
sorry, I'm
better way,
just not
Yeah.
grasping the fact that your assessment, that you're looking at it saying, I need an additional step to feel my worth.
yeah, but
I
in some
don't think you
cases,
should
I mean,
need, I
you're getting
think
paid for what you're doing. It just,
If
if
you
you don't feel
look at-
appreciated, go somewhere else.
if you look at it and I come in at step 5, that means my min is way low, so my max is going to be low. So then if I max out at, step 10, that's not the max to everybody else. So I don't think we're doing it just because it feels good, and I really like Commissioner Flanders and she should keep growing.
You've identified, we're trying to increase the lows and the highs
Yep,
to get
exactly.
marked up with the
Because some of
market.
your
So
positions really aren't going to get that big. They've been paid fairly all along, and they're not going to like this study, But to the ones that are having to come in now at a minimum, they've been underpaid for a long time.
It's just the glass half full or half empty. Some
Right.
of us are saying, like myself, Todd, or others, who
Yep.
might be saying that a lot of people are paid at the max, or probably will. And staff is saying, yeah, some of us are not paid low, and it's so.
And I would say if you
Some of us
looked at
can
this
get
every
by. That's
year,
why we're adjusting.
you would have caught all of this a lot sooner. And that's what we're trying to avoid for the
Right.
future. Because when you say we do a study and we kind of wait,
The world doesn't wait.
yeah, so that's why we're trying to do this, so we can,
Yep.
we can not have this conversation
Again.
next year. You're-
All right, you ready to move on?
Yep. So that just implementation, kind of what you said, in this 87 and 91, you have 50% of employees that are maxed out. Not saying they need to move because we want to, but by moving that, they get a little bit more growth and it puts them in better competitiveness to the market. HHS, again, we looked at their implementation. Some things that the board needs to consider is when we implement, moving them into the closest step. If we say and a 3%, how do we deal with steps after that for people that would have gotten a step or now because they're in the system can get a step because they're different. That's their cost, 169 for half the year, 338. Again, those numbers can fluctuate a little bit. Management said, yes, those look agreeable to what we have for funding on that. So now we just need to say, are we comfortable with the grid? Do we want to go?
I don't think you've told us what the cost of, for coming years of implementing this plan would be for people other than 87 to 91 and HHS. So I don't think you've given us a number for that.
Well, because I don't know what you guys have settled on. I
Well,
mean,
but
we
you-
have the
you-
90, we have
You've
this.
chosen 90 for these numbers. So
Right.
if you chose 90 for those numbers, what would that number be?
For everyone as of January.
I don't care if you pick July 1st or January 1st, I just so I know, but I want to know what it would cost
Yep.
to put everybody in the whole county at the 90th percentile above what we're paying now.
So on average, it'll be about 1.75 to 2.25%. I mean, if you did the whole county, because most of them will receive, if you just put them into the step system, just the new grid, their grids look much similar to what we did because we did a major adjustment for a lot of them. Some of them are going to get a bigger bump. Do you know what I mean? Because we did some adjustments to those, so they might just be sliding in and getting very little percent.
I'm just trying to understand what an average would be. So I'm not sure that you're counting HHS and 87 to 91, but I think you're saying it would be in the neighborhood of 2%. Is that correct?
1.75 to 2%.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or I think you said 1.75 to 2.25.
2.5. Yeah, depending upon. But then that also, how you move them in and when you move them in varies because some of those are going to get a step this year, which means they're, you know what I mean? So I can give you exact cost once we figure out if this is how you want to implement. Because I assume we were matching how you did the union and that. So then we would have to run those numbers if that's how you're going to do it for next year. I just need some more guidance of what that final cost is because we've talked about, we kind of want this to look here. You've asked me to give you a number. I'm giving you numbers for this group. It's going to be smaller for the rest because again, they don't have as much of a, movement. But I need to know going forward, we want to reduce where we are to the market. This is too high. We want to come lower. At the beginning, the board said, we know we can have all kinds of options, but we don't know what we want until we see what we don't want, if that makes sense. So now we've seen one version. We've talked about implementations. If you reduce that slightly, what that looks like. I can't keep having multiple grids and costs because there's a lot of manual things and I don't want to mess that up. I need the board to say, okay, we're in agreement to how we move the implementation. We're in agreement to at least where we are today for a grid. Get those costs and then you say, okay, this is what it is for 2020 23, if we implement this group half year. If we did the whole county, this is what it would be, if that's what you want.
Yeah.
What it is for 2024, you know what I mean? But right now you have so many moving pieces. I can't just do one.
Do you know what were you trying to figure out the annual cost of our
I'd
annual
like to
payroll
know.
is 2%? What's our
Well-
annual payroll?
Well, it's
a
38 million, I think.
Did we
But
figure it's
that
$1 million
includes
to implement this if you
2%.
push 2%?
2%. You remember that number?
2% of what our total payroll is right now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think when I looked up personnel
have-
services, it was
That-
38 million, but I think that probably included healthcare. I don't know that, but
It would be less than that though, Jason, because that would, these costs are already with implementation of 1/3 of our employees.
But it's an annual basis.
If it's annually, if we said we're gonna implement this 2023, it's just, if you're looking, it's all rough number, I don't know if it gives you. an
But I don't
exact,
think
it's
she's
probably
saying annually it's gonna be 2%.
well, I think you are.
No, I think she's saying to transition
To
on to this 2%.
transition the
Transition
cost. I mean,
to
because
it.
if you think about what your annual increase to payroll is, if you do a 3% market adjustment, like COLA,
It's
that's gonna be a
3%.
3% on top of your current
But
payroll.
we've raised it by 2 million every year, or whatever the number is. If the 2%, we've raised the base, and then we're going up from that new higher base.
Every year, the cost of living rate changes the
Right,
scale,
right,
3%.
Right,
so-
but we. how
Right,
much are
but
we
you also
raising the
have people
base?
falling off, so they're not getting steps.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? So right now you have 50% of that one group at least that are maxed out, they're only getting a COLA. So theirs would be 3% payroll cost.
Well, for this year, the cost of the step increases was about 2/3 the cost of the COLA. So the total was about $1 million for the 3% adjustment and about 600,000 for the step increase.
Yeah, I can,
So you'd be a little,
Just
obviously,
gotta figure out how to
percentage
pull
less
this
than that, you'd be
off.
on the 700, some thousand probably, to implement it.
That's what I'm
overall.
trying to
It's a rough,
understand.
it's kind of rough, it's not.
No, I understand that, but I just have to know the ballpark
Yep.
of what it is. to
can
be
somebody
able to-
help me just pull this off? I have the spreadsheet of the payroll.
Want to get consensus.
I wanna get off of
Like
this
this pay grid to the 23 step pay grid repeal. If she wants that before we move into HHS.
Well, that part is that.
Oh, is it because I'm
Yeah, yeah,
Those
you're,
two things.
yeah,
So do I
Well,
need to change
yeah, I
on
was
there?
yeah, I
Gonna
think
say,
Briggs
kinda
actually has to.
wanted her to
We
get
kinda
through her.
Briggs should be right back
So
there.
if we can.
Oh, here, you know what? I can just pull it up on mine. Never mind.
Do you need another laptop or something?
Yeah, I have them.
Well, I think we kind of hijacked
It's
her.
good to have two
Yeah,
laptops ready.
She likes
So this
that
is,
when she-
these numbers we got.
That's
are
fine,
for
you can leave that
roughly
up. That's fine. I'll
150
just pull it up
employees.
on here.
Roughly, yes. Yep, and this,
So that leaves
just to keep in
another
mind, this is what we've asked her to do.
160 That gives us another 160 or 170 that you would move from the 2023 pay grid to this 23 line pay grid.
Yes.
So
Is
you're
it-
moving them less.
The number that was used in our budget last year was 365 employees. They weren't all filled, but that was the numbers. So if we'd done 150, we'd have 200 left, about.
Actually, our
Yeah,
our
about
approved budget,
Yeah.
I think, is about 380, but it's about 360 that we have filled.
We have 360, so then it's.
Be about 200.
200.
And she's saying a 2%, 1.7 to 2% increase on the salary portion of those 200, which have already been moved one chunk. Now they just need to move a little more.
Yeah, all of LELS has and AFSMI has, so you should be at over half of our employees there.
But
One more question.
I think we're saying that this, if we did the 90th percentile, I think we're saying that this new pay grid would move everybody else up to another, whether it's 2% or whatever it is.
Based on what the board's implementation philosophy is. Last time, the board's implementation philosophy was to wait till there's an open contract, so that would be a couple of years from now, depending on what you choose. And I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. I'm saying that's what was chosen in the past. Realistically, I think because we're doing ongoing maintenance and this year, this is what's in front of you, you need to figure out if this is the right pay philosophy and then figure out how you want to apply that to the rest of our workforce.
Okay.
But again, Tessa's trying to resolve as many of our pay issues as she can. And the reason why we hired Tessa is we have pay issues We did well over 100 employee transactions last year. I know in the redesigned numbers, the attrition rate in HHS is pretty astronomical.
Tessia, do you need direction on 87 to 91 before we get into HHS?
Well, I would hope that you would have the same direction for both.
Okay, so then would you prefer to get
Because
through the
otherwise
whole?
you're gonna make one group really happy and one group not happy.
Right.
So I mean, I think
Done that.
to Commissioner Betcher's question is that final cost. I just need to know for cost,
Uh-huh.
if you implement anything, I mean, we talked about doing those two this year, July 1st. Because if you do that, that changes what my 2024 cost
Right.
will be. And I don't want to have 10 different scenarios, so I need you guys to focus and say, yes, July 1st. And even if I give you that number and you say, I don't want to be there, I want to lower it, then I can do that number fairly quickly. But right now, I have to manually go in and make sure everyone's at a certain percentage and that. So you're asking me to do like 5 different options right now. I just need you to focus a little bit. Then I can get you numbers for this year and for next year, so you know. And then we can probably compare it to if you ignored me and went ahead, what that payroll would be, we would know that, and we could know what the actual cost is. That's how we try to cost it, is what the implementation is. Then, what will it be in 2025? You know what I mean? Building on, because you're gonna have some additional growth. Some people will fall off, but you also have people leaving and coming into the organization at lower levels.
Do we have consensus on the board to make the date of July 1st?
I would do July 1st for both.
All right, well, that's what I'm asking. Todd?
Yeah.
So I guess my question would be, and it's a question, so I don't want everybody to assume that I have an answer just because I have a question. But we have a plan, we have a budget for HHS for the entire year. They haven't moved over yet. And I think we have a budget for the 97 to 91. And so I think if we were consistent with what you guys did with unions, I don't think we would move them over. But I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I'm just trying to understand the thinking of why we would move them over when we've already made a plan for this year. And maybe we should, but that's what my question is.
Can we actually move HHS? We haven't gone through the study and went through all their job descriptions, and that's all been done, placed, you got numbers, accounts, everything for them.
Yeah, like the final part is to the classification and appeal process, because you have to do that by law. So that's not finalized. That's why some of this, but some of these implementation, what you say today could change that number. So don't take a picture and say, you said it was going to cost this. Like, but to your point, yep.
System was a year.
You can transition.
Right,
up.
but you
let it take 3 years if you want.
So the merit system basically says if you're in merit, you have to pay this position. I'm just going to use case aid, a minimum of X and a maximum.
No, I understand it, but I think we had to get the classifications for all their job descriptions over there, and then we also have to get, which I think we've already given the merit system notice that we want to move, but that's
Yeah, the merit
timeline.
system classifies them their own way, and it says
but the
basically.
timeline for getting HHS over to get off the merit system, it's not like we can tell them tomorrow we're off.
No, you cannot.
Okay, so what is the timeline for that?
You have to, oh, go ahead.
Somebody knows.
Do you have another question?
Well, you can make up your own transition plan. No, I was going to answer Susan's question, but you can set up your own transition plan, which is part of what Tessa's going to have to work with HHS.
Well, I get that, but we
as we
can't,
move it.
if we're looking at implementation costs for HHS, and somebody can answer, we can't just say July, I don't think we can say today, can we? That we're
Yeah,
off
Yes,
the
you
merit
can.
doesn't
system July
care
1st.
how
You
you
can.
pay
We
them
can. Okay,
or
that's
when
fine.
you pay them.
No,
it
I just want to know that
okay,
we
yep.
can say July 1st, we're done with the merit.
Getting
system,
off
we'll be
merit says that you're not going to use some of their recruiting tools and stuff like that, and it'll save you money just because you're not paying.
It's like a phased getting off. is
Then
what
Yeah.
we-
the
Because they're a
next
state agency, they don't want to lose the revenue.
part of my question would be, well, why wouldn't we just implement everybody at the same time instead of doing it at 2 different times?
And that's part of the question I was trying to answer.
Okay.
So if we want to be consistent with what was done with the unions, we'd go back to December 2021 for for 4 of the groups. If we wanted to be consistent with what we did with another union, you'd go back to December 2022. If you want to be consistent with what we're trying to negotiate with another union, it'd be December 2022. So wouldn't be looking forward. If you want to be consistent, we got to go backwards.
And what about implementing everybody at the same time on the new system?
That's ideally what would have been done in December of 2021.
But here we are.
Right, so it can make it worse, or we can try to resolve past issues.
And the reason
Well-
I say that implement in July is exactly what you said. These people have been waiting on us
Right.
since 2020, the beginning of 2022. And saying we're gonna wait 6 more months so we can do it all together, to me is like, it doesn't make
No,
sense.
but how about if we did everybody July 1st?
We could do that too.
I mean, aren't we gonna,
If we can get,
Aren't we gonna
if we
anchor
can
the
get
other
the,
group?
if we
Because
can get the
even though-
unions to agree,
if there's
yes, we
some
could.
logic to it, but I'm not, that's my question.
Well, I can cost, if that's like one of the deciding factors, I can cost them both out if you move, because that's how we originally did, and then I separated HHS out so that I can say to HHS management, here's what the cost is. I separated 87 to 91, so I can cost that out, that's fine. So I'll cost both, or, July 1st, but I just need to know, are you comfortable then saying how we did the last one? We'll move them in to the system, ensuring that there is a 3%. That is how you guys did negotiations for the union.
I just have one question. on
Yep.
that. So with the first move we did with the unions, we did do the 3%. Now, when we're moving this smaller amount to this, do we have to do the 3%?
Not on the ones that have already moved,
Not on the ones that have already moved.
But
because they already got the pay study.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why when, with HHS and with 87 to 91, I think the 3% lines up with what we did with the rest. And in this next move for the ones that already have got it, I don't know as we need to do the 3% on top of that.
No, so what I hear is if we didn't move everyone this year, or we did, if you already got we would just move you into the step closest to, and then if you had a step that you would have gotten, you would still get it. So that doesn't disrupt anything. If you were not part of that first group, you would be guaranteed that 3% move into the system. My only question is, because running into this, is you'll have some people that would have been maxed out, so they wouldn't have gotten a step. In here now, they'll move in. Would they get it this year or wait until next year? Because the first half didn't. Do you know what I'm saying? If you had an anniversary-
Didn't wait, they got their step.
Yeah, so, or if I was maxed out and my anniversary date was May 1st, I just got my COLA and that's it. Do you know what I'm saying? So I just want to make sure we're clear on what the board says, because that will help.
We have to know what it costs. So right now, I believe we've committed to about 2 million in extra dollars next year already. That's with the step increases, the 3% adjustment, the healthcare costs, and I think it's 3 employees that we've approved. Is that right? And I'm just roughing 100,000 apiece for those employees. And
There's the salary on those were 75, I think.
but there's benefits too.
Yeah.
And
Actually, no, that was cost of those.
That was for both.
the vet's the additional legal secretary, and then with Jess would just approve somebody.
Yeah, so you're 3.
Veteran service office.
Yeah, so even if we said 75, we'd be about at 2 million, and 2 million is already just under a 5% levy increase already, okay? So we've already committed, except for, I understand, some of that money can come from somewhere else. We don't know what the state's going to give us. Some of it'll be one-time money, some of it'll be maybe ongoing money. Who knows what the federal government's going to do when they're trying to solve this budget deal. So if we assume we've already committed to $2 million, which is, I didn't do the number that way, but 5% is $2,100,000. So how much of a levy increase are we comfortable really committing to before the budgeting process has even begun?
I've never done a budget where I backed myself from the end result, go backwards.
Right, but we only have so much that I think we can expect the taxpayers to pay. And so we can't be agreeing to all kinds of things without considering what that cost is going to be to people. I don't think we want to end up with a 10% levy increase because we've agreed to all these things along the way. I don't think that would be a good plan. And I don't mean we have to back ourselves into a corner, but I think we have to be cognizant of what we're agreeing to and what the impact of that's going to be on the levy, on the employees, but also on the taxpayer.
Very well.
Yeah, you agree
Fair
with
point.
that? Yeah.
Chair, I completely understand what Commissioner Betcher's talking about, but I also need everybody to understand that, you know, we started a pay study back in 2020, and we implemented it for about a third of our employees. And then we implemented it for maybe another 20% of our employees. Now, through that whole time, I get comments like, have they just forgot about us? Do they care about us? Da, 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 da. None of them good. So if we're now going to get to the point where we're going to delay with these two groups that rightfully should be saying, hey, you know, for the last year and a half, I've been waiting for this, and now we're going to delay again. It's tough. It's really tough. I mean, because rightfully they should be asking for back pay.
So I don't disagree with that either, Scott. I mean, I don't. I think the people of Goodhue County, you guys work hard. I think you do a great job. I want to pay you as well as we possibly can. But I'm reluctant to agree to what's going to bring the levy before we've even had budget talks too high. And so that's why I'm interested in when we're at fourth in income, fourth in all these other things,
Sure.
I'm interested in what's the rationale for why we can afford to, I understand about what point you said, but I'm looking at what's the rationale that we can expect the taxpayers or the taxpayers will agree that they can afford more. And that's not an implementation date. That's about what number do we want to end up at.
But it is about an implementation date, because if you say, and I'm just going to use this as an example, if you say July 1st, yes, HHS, yes, 8791, they've been waiting a year and a half, you have some positions that are like $2, $3 below market on the min, so they're going to get a bigger increase. If I pay for that this year in the money I've already asked for, that does impact next year. That will impact the levy, because if I have to do it next year, do you know what I mean? And next year's cost, that it's going to be higher. So that's why that July 1st does implement, because if it takes me $2 to get to $20, let's say this year, and management said, yep, we have that for Tessa, next year I'm only going to move my step and my COLA. I don't have that additional pay.
But in the end, what's going to move our baseline number up the most is whether we believe we should be at the 70th, the 80th, or the 90th percentile. Is that correct or not correct?
Well, the grid will, yeah. And I would say, instead of trying to figure it all out today, help me calculate. So on the implementation date, yes, July 1st, all of them, I'll run it. Yes to July 1st, just HHS 8791. Going through that with both groups and the classifications, finalizing it, will have one cost. And then for you to say, with all of the calculations you have, you will know then, if we did this, what the cost would be in 2024. That will tell you, right, where you want to be.
Are you going to run all this number just at the 90th percentile, or are you going to run it with other percentiles?
Yep.
So we can see
So
the
that,
difference?
like I said earlier, I did kind of two scenarios. One, and I'm going to take the percentile out, because if I go from 90th percentile to, like, let's just say the 80th percentile, it doesn't really change much, because at the end of the day, Excel will look at the formula. It's very small.
Yes.
So what I did instead, if it's okay with this group, is the 90th percentile said we were going to move to 1/20th of market. So we're moving up. I then cut that back to 116, I think, 0.5. So instead of being a 9% adjustment to the grid, it's a 6%. I thought those would be two, if it's okay, we can cost those out. I just need you to finalize, are you okay with that implementation? Then I'll know for sure option A this year, option B this year, option A 2024, option B 2024. We just need to make sure we're all in agreement that how we move into the system, we're all on the same page. Because right now I'm getting different.
Well,
Yes, you are.
as I'm listening more, it makes sense to me that, I don't know about the HHS, but certainly the 87 to 91 should move July 1st. And the HHS, I think we have a little more leeway with because they haven't been part of this system before. So that's how I.
That would be one of my questions, is the importance of getting everyone other than HHS, take that in and of itself, onto this pay grade to know what it's going to actually cost us. But at least then we have that one pay grid. And then HHS, which at least is on its own on the merit system. And then we could decide to do that at a later date? Or not do it, or are you saying it's?
We have a track record of not doing things consistently, and it doesn't really bode well with employees' emotions.
All right, but HHS is on the merit system,
They've
so
been on
it
it
does
for a
have
long
its own
time.
system. And I think they're well paid on that.
Well, but they're part of the original pay study in 2020, and we've done nothing with them.
As an employee, I wouldn't know that I'm merit or non-merit. I mean,
I'm sorry, say it again.
as an employee, I wouldn't know that I'm merit system or non-merit. I just know what my pay range is. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
So.
And you want to be consistent with everyone else.
Yeah, and I would say,
Okay.
so even if you said July 1st for those two groups, you still will have that last group has to come over on January and move into that grid somehow. So,
All right,
you know what I mean? There'll still be a little cost there. We're just,
all right. So I guess my perspective would be that yes, this has dragged on for so long that I would really like to get it done this year. So I would go for a July 1st date.
For both of those groups.
well, and just see the cost,
So at
like,
least find out, yes.
Yep.
See the
Okay.
cost at a couple of different set
those
points.
two,
So,
okay.
mhm.
So, Jason?
Yeah, it's fine, we'll see the cost. I mean, I get that it's drug on or that we talk about that too, but we also have to do what makes sense for the taxpayers.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
Nobody, we did a pace, I'm not sure what all the consistency and the concern is, how many pay studies you implemented over the course of the years? So how do you rationalize consistency over what we've done just when we implemented pay studies? I don't,
Every one that I'm aware of, including the ones before I was here, was done unilaterally across the board.
I get it. And there's a lot of things that aren't consistent with what, people had landlines,
Well, thanks.
whereby when we did those pay studies too.
Yeah.
No.
So I guess,
I can't imagine employees spend, if they got too much time to sit down and worry that how this is all implemented, they need to focus on their work.
Well, it's tough though, in some cases, we have employees sitting there that got the increase in 21. They're sitting next to somebody that got it in 22 and they still don't have it. Those are real life examples of our employees.
I
And
think,
it's tough to explain that Susan gets it, Jason will get it a year later. Linda, you can wait.
Same person doing the same job,
No,
see?
same people in the same department sitting next to each other doing a different job in a different union or a non-union.
Well,
And I can introduce you to them if you'd like to meet them.
it's fine. They got my number. They can call me. I can try to explain it to them. But we can go with implementation to get this all solved.
Yes. And I would really like to see, and I don't know if you can do it this way, but if we chose to be at the second position or we chose to be at the fourth position, what it would be. And I understand there's a lot of compression, so between second and fourth, there's sometimes not that much difference.
Well, at fourth, you're right where you are right now.
We don't need to do anything. We don't have
I
any
thought you
problems.
said some places we were fifth.
Well, it's not gonna be exact. You're gonna be,
Yeah, but I mean, if
Some
you're,
positions
if
will be
you're
4,
looking
some will be
at
5.
exactly ranking yourself from top to bottom, and that's what I hear you say,
Well,
then we're exactly where
we don't need to
you,
do anything.
we don't need to do anything.
I see.
What I'm saying is,
It's not working.
it's not working, so I'm proposing two options. They're not that big of a difference between, I just don't want to come back next time and then someone say, okay, well, now I did this and I want to see, I just want to make sure we're comfortable. And at the end of the day, you guys can do what you want to do because that's your, you know,
That's our job.
but I want people who are listening to not get frustrated, like, oh my gosh, we keep seeing this person, but nothing's getting done. So
I think the two biggest problems that were identified, though, were that the low end was too low, and there wasn't enough of a benefit to being a supervisor.
yeah,
And I think that those two things can be fixed no matter what number we choose for the percentile, I believe.
Yep.
And then I also do believe that some of the problems that we have with hiring simply have to do with the demographics of people my age retiring out and not enough people going into these
For
jobs.
sure.
Yeah.
All right, backing up for a moment, can we, first of all, do we have a consensus that we do want one pay grid? That that's the direction we're going, to try and get everybody on one pay grid? Todd?
Yep.
With 23 steps increase is what's been shown, yes.
To try and get everybody over.
I agree, we're trying to get everybody on one pay grid.
All right, so that's the direction we would like to go, get everybody on one pay grid.
Yep.
All right, date-wise, can we live with that? Do we have consensus of July 1? Or,
July 1 for who?
pardon?
July 1 for everybody or July 1?
I'm gonna cost both out.
Mhm.
Just HHS and 8791, and then everyone.
All right,
Because if Scott finds money and it can all be done this year and,
I will say the logistics of opening up all the union contracts, et cetera, by July 1 is a little ambitious, but Tessa said she'll cost it out, so we should get that number.
All right,
And I believe we had a question in the audience.
Nina?
One of the things I want to just mention that the board knows really from a health and human services perspective, I would encourage you to consider not leaving us behind. We've done a lot of work when it comes to getting to this point. This has been talked about for years when it comes to the one pay grade, and then also us eventually moving up the merit. They're connected but separate. And when it comes to moving forward and helping us to continue to hire and keep quality employees, I would encourage to consider a same implementation date for health and human services than the rest of the county.
You remember the HHS comes with a higher
I'm sorry?
HHS implementation always comes with a higher HR bill too. So.
Yes, but we have to know what that is.
Aren't we saving money though, because we're not gonna be on the merit system? Don't we have to go to the state to get?
yep, you
Yeah,
will,
they
you
do
won't
their
save
HR.
it this year.
Yeah, and you don't save much. We don't pay very much for it either.
so Nina, I think you're asking to go on July 1 rather than January 1. Is that correct or is that not correct?
Just not be
I
forgotten.
would say go with the same as rest of the county.
Right, but-
I would not want health and human services and also very female dominated department to be left behind when we've had a lot of conversations. We know we have struggles with some decisions, and I think these are, as everything else, to critical services to Goodhue County residents. And it's tough to continue to provide them with excellent care if we are not able to hire and keep individuals. When it comes to the merit system, the board actually has not officially decided yet that Goodhue County is moving forward. The deadline for the next time to be able to inform the merit system is December 1st, 2022. Oh, it's 2023 now. And there's work that needs to take place when it comes to doing that. And currently HR and Health and Human Services are in the conversations when it comes to what that would look like. I think there's been a lot of agreement and talk when it comes to, yes, the writing is on the wall. And we're all in, we're ready, it's the right direction to go when it comes to ensuring that our employees will continue to be fairly paid and we're competitive. There's a lot of work needs to be done, but we also still have to remember that the pay from the merit system is connected, but they're separate. So there's a couple of different decisions there that needs to be made. My only thing I'm saying, I said, I wish and want to advocate strongly for health and human services, and I would not want to delay things for health and human services professionals that are done for other county employees, whatever that date is.
But there's already 2 dates, 2 different dates, because I think Scott was saying that the unions wouldn't go on until January 1, and 87 to 91 hopefully would go on July 1.
Well, we'll
Yeah.
pick the July.
Okay,
No,
so-
well, I guess, just to clarify,
Okay.
were you finished? I'm not.
I'm done,
So,
yes.
sorry. So they could go on January 1 next year, or whatever the end of the pay date is, or they could go on when their union contract ends. That's what the previous philosophy was. Or, I mean, we can try to get them on July 1, and Tessa said she'd cost it out. So there's all kinds of dates they could go on. But, you know, the reality is we have 5 unions that are already on. One is close. I'm hoping we get
The
it set up
challenge
soon.
with getting the unions on by July 1 is getting the language and everything done with the union contract.
Get it all.
That doesn't mean you can't put them on July 1 and negotiate. It may be September before we get
Right.
the memorandums to agree to everything,
Yeah.
but we can, which is fine. So that's not an issue.
All right,
And to Nina's comment, and this goes way back, when not the last pay study we did as in this group, but the one previous, in 2014, the last piece of it was to bring
Yep.
HHS
That was-
onto the pay scale, and it never got done.
That was the county board's goal
So
in 20.
really, they've been left out since 2014 of getting on the same pay scale as the rest of the county. Not since 2021, since 2014. So leaving them out longer is just, to me, it's unconscionable.
So you'd like to do July 1 for HHS?
I'd like to do July 1, and I think theoretically, we could do it for everybody and get everybody on at one time.
all right, so theoretically, we are in agreement that July 1 is the date that we want to aim for everyone.
It's okay with me.
Okay.
All right, what else do you need?
And I got direction that you want to see both pay grids. So,
And the cost.
Back to
And
him,
the
what do you mean
cost.
by both?
so the one is the one you've seen all along, like the one, I'm
Yep,
gonna say the
okay.
120, I'm
Now
not
we've
gonna
got
say
it.
percentiles
Yep.
anymore.
Mhm.
And the other one is, I think it's like 116.5%. So it's lower than that. It would be closer. It's hard to say the 80th percentile because it really doesn't change a lot of jobs. So I'm trying to do the percent instead. So
And
you
that
guys
puts
can
us like
see.
in third.
Yeah,
I think that would be, I think that would be realistic just by virtue of wanting to know how much.
and the nice
much
thing
it
is if you say yes, I can show you the difference. Like, do you know what I mean? You can look at it per job, like, if that helps. I don't know, but I just need clarity.
I would like to see the difference. Anyone else?
Sure.
No.
My comment is, we dance around for negotiation purposes, we dance around Dakota County. And in reality, we have the longest border with Dakota County. They are in the mix in my book. They always have been, and they always will be. Whether we want to use them in negotiations, I understand that part. But we are where we are. And if you throw Dakota County in it, we're fourth already. Or fifth. I think we're
Yep.
borderline. So, if you want to go to 80th percentile, whatever it is, in reality, we're still gonna fight who
We're
our
always,
neighbors are.
we're always
Yeah,
gonna
we
fight.
We're always gonna fight who our
Yeah,
neighbors
We're
are.
never
And
gonna.
if we
win that
start
battle.
out lower, we're always gonna be lower.
Mhm. But we have to.
And we
win that
can't,
battle.
we can't compete. I just don't think we'll be competitive, so.
But that's just it. We can't
No,
compete.
no, no.
We don't
That's
have the tax base either that Dakota County has.
No,
Unless there's some other way to.
Cutting.
We don't have the resources.
Well, that's, I mean, all we talk about is one part of it. There's a whole lot of other parts of it in a budget process. You know, we all have the 23 budget. We all have all the way back to 14 right on the website. You can go back and start looking and try to figure out where it is, what it is we need to cut, if that's truly what we believe. I mean,
I don't think I've suggested cutting. I've suggested being careful about increases so we don't expand the gap between us and the 11 other counties. That I think that we have to look at that.
okay. Well, I don't think we're going to expand the gap. I think we're going to be where we're going to be all the way along. I think everybody else is marching up just with us.
Yeah, maybe.
And, you know.
But we can agree that we're taking steps to keep up or be a little above. Right?
Well,
We're marching, we're not just saying no.
no, we have to keep up to the degree we can, but I mean, it's that very fine line of what we can afford
Yep.
versus what we would like to pay
Sure.
everyone.
And I think, though, to make sure those identified positions, those are where they need to be, and letting the grid kind of calibrate itself, if that makes sense. And I'll have two options with costing for all those.
All right, so
Is
does
there-
that give you what you need?
Yep, I
right
just
now?
want to make sure there's no other questions or options that I need to look at, because I was doing work while I was driving with my colleagues, so to be
All right.
prepared. So I want to make sure that I have everything that you have concerns or suggestion.
So if I'm understanding this right, you're going to come back with a proposal that shows what it costs to put them on in July,
Yep,
what it costs to do it at the end of the year. Not at the end of the year?
oh, yeah, I can do that. You mean, so
Well,
like 2020?
No, I'm not trying to add. I just want to understand exactly what you're coming back with.
Mine
me
was to
exactly.
move, everyone July 1st. Option 1, option 2, just move HHS 8791 July 1st. So then, to Commissioner's comment, then I would do 2024, the rest, if you chose option 2. If you want to do all of them, I just need to know what that looks like. If you say December, do you mean like December 1st
Well, I think you meant the first of the year.
or 1st of the year? I mean, 1st of the year is super easy because then everyone moves at the same time.
Right. I'm not trying to, I want to understand what I'm going to
Yeah.
see next time I see
So
you.
my direction I heard was everyone July 1st and those two groups July 1st. So I have two options with two different pay grids. Calibrated, a little bit different.
So one is the 90 percentile and one is,
Not percentile.
I'm not going to say percentile. I'm going to say one puts you at 120 above, one or 20% above, one puts you at 16% above.
okay.
And the
All right.
16% above roughly translates to what rank?
It would be, so the 1 or the 20% is about 1 or 2, it would probably be like the third. So like right now you're 4th.
And I think you're saying at 4th, we would still be getting rid of the lowest paying things. We could still adjust for the,
4th is right where you're at.
no, but we still could raise the lower, so we're already at 4th for the starting
Yeah.
place too?
It would put you about 3rd, I'm going to say. It's hard to say that because again, they all don't work the same way. I tried to use percentiles, but.
No, I understand that. But if I look at this,
Yep.
it looks like on the upper levels, on the maxes, were higher than, well, at least the mean, because I think this one is a mean, but on the bottom, it looks like we aren't. So it looks like we were more off on the bottom than we were on the top.
Yeah, because of your range, but that's also outdated.
Yes, that's what I have.
So, yeah.
But didn't you also mention that the lower grades would go up probably more, and up here they probably go up less, percentage-wise?
The grades
Not the grades,
Or
but
this-
the percentage of,
step.
I think it's because the higher ends were further above the at means already, so they wouldn't change as much as ones that were below the
Right,
mean
that's what I
or.
was trying to say.
Will be higher than that.
Higher than the higher one, right.
Yep.
All right, so I guess I got confused because I thought we had talked about trying to get everybody over on July 1.
I'm gonna
That's
cost
one of
that
the
out.
costs.
Yep.
All right,
And if it, I mean, the good news is, even if you say it's not gonna work with the union, we're gonna choose October 1st because we have to, I'm just using that because I like those numbers, they're quarter.
sure, sure.
It makes easy for calculation. If I gave Scott a number, he would at least say, yeah, we have that and we can, you know what I mean? And if you decide September 1st because it has to go through MOUs, then that is what it is.
Okay. Though I would think that if we're talking about the union contracts, that this would be a benefit to them, not a detraction, therefore they'd be more open.
Yeah, if we only ask them to take a wage increase, the answer will be for sure yes. I would encourage the board, though, if at that point we get into closed meetings for negotiations, I would encourage that if there's some historic issues within contracts that we'd like to address, as we're going to give them an additional money, we probably want to have a discussion about if there's some things that we'd like to ask for as we gave them an increase in pay.
There
If
also
that
may
makes
be some
sense.
things that come out of the legislature that may
Yes.
affect how we think going forward on some parts of the contract too. Because there's a lot of moving parts at the legislature.
It's not just me who has the moving parts.
Right, exactly.
No, I realize that. I guess I'm looking back that, I mean, we didn't want to renegotiate when we had a contract
Yeah.
with an end date. But now because we want to, now we're going to go back in and try to renegotiate. And I can see if you're offering more, then that's not,
Yeah.
that seems like a no-brainer.
And we don't have to go back and ask on some of these, but there's some things that we've just historically got a flat no out of the unions. When we're offering money just in the middle of a contract, that's a good time to ask, hey, we've
We'll
been
do
talking
this.
about this thing the last 6 open contracts. Let's talk about it again. It's a good time to get some wording clarified.
Well, I don't think it sets a very good precedent considering where we started, but I mean,
Well, we could treat them like the other unions were, and we could tell them you got to wait till your contract's open too, and I don't think that's a good precedent.
no, I definitely want us to get everybody over on a one pay grid if it's at all possible.
I'll give you the cost and then we can worry about that, okay? Because if
Okay,
it works, then we'll make it work.
all right, any other questions for Tessia? You've been very patient with us, thank you.
When do you think you'll be back?
Not in a week, but not in 2 weeks.
So the end of this week.
No. Because I would like to run this with all the classifications because employees are like, okay, what about my job? So I want to make sure that we're comfortable with that too, because basically the next steps would be if the board says yes to a pay grid, let's say, an implementation, then we can send out those classifications because it doesn't mean anything to an employee if you say you're moving into the grid, but I don't know what the grid looks like. Do you know what I'm saying? So they're waiting for, okay, what's going to change? And if we halt it, then we might just have to move them on their current and how that works. So they're impatient, but I want to make sure that this is done and that the board is comfortable. So. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.
Released.